Welcome to the final episode of our series for the Australian Space Agency. Last week we spoke about the challenges of space, including space sustainability and the protection of dark and quiet skies. In our final episode, we will be discussing what the future of space looks like and what it might mean for First Nations people. As you've heard throughout this series, the space sector has evolved significantly since the 1960s, and we are now witnessing the dawn of a new era. Advances in technology have made it easier than ever to put things and people in space. This has created new possibilities for space services to benefit life on Earth and to explore the universe. We are also faced with a future where a permanent human presence in space is possible. Today, we will explore what the future of space looks like in Australia and the world. Welcome to Episode 10, The Future of Space.
Welcome to the last episode of our series with the Australian Space Agency. Today, we will be talking about the future of space. Throughout this series, you've heard about the importance of space technologies, the opportunities for First Nations people and business to become involved in space, and how our traditional knowledges could benefit the space sector. It's safe to say that our involvement with space has changed considerably over the past 60 years. In the 1960s, the first human landed on the moon, and now we use space technologies every day to do things like check the weather or use GPS on our phones. In just over 60 years, space has become part of our everyday life. But what does the future of space look like? There are over 600 Australian organisations that are involved in space. And these companies are working on exciting projects that are huge for Australia's future in space. Gilmore Space Technologies are a Queensland space company who late last year were issued Australia's first commercial orbital launch permit. Gilmore Space will attempt to launch the first Australian-designed and built rocket into the orbit in the next couple of months, which would be a significant milestone for the Australian space sector. Gilmore Space engaged closely with the Jurul people, who are the local traditional owner group in the Bowen area where the site is located. Southern Launch is another Australian space company which is located in South Australia. Last month, in an important event for the Australian space sector, the American company Varda Space Industries successfully brought back its space capsule called Winnebago 2 from space to the Coonibba Test Range in South Australia. The Coonibba Test Range is operated by Southern Launch in partnership with the Coonibba Community Aboriginal Corporation, and this return was the first commercial return to a commercial spaceport anywhere in the world. These activities highlight the opportunity for Australia to become a responsible launch and return hub for the global space community in the near future. These activities highlight the opportunity for Australia to become a responsible launch and return hub for the global space community into the future. And they show that First Nations people, like the Coonibba community, can be a part of this journey. There are many more Australian space companies doing exciting things, and you can find out more by visiting space.gov.au. As we look further into the future, there are many possibilities. In the past, we might have thought that exploring the universe and building settlements on other planets would be impossible. However, new technology makes it easier to put these things in space, and now this future may not be far away. In fact, Australia is working with other countries to get people back to the moon and to Mars as well. The American Space Agency, NASA, has a space mission called Artemis Mission, which aims to send humans back to the moon and eventually onto Mars by 2035. The mission will involve exploring the moon for new scientific discoveries that will help us understand how to survive on other planets and help us prepare for missions to Mars. The journey to Mars will take around 14 months, covering a huge distance of 804 million kilometers. If the mission is successful, astronauts could spend up to 500 days on the Martian surface before returning to Earth. The Australian Space Agency is working with NASA on the Moon to Mars program. The Moon to Mars program represents a big investment in the Australian space sector, which shows our innovative ideas and technologies to the world. Australia has committed to designing and building an Australian-made rover to use on the Moon. A lunar rover is a vehicle that you use on the surface of the Moon. The Australian rover, named rover, will collect soil from the Moon's surface. The soil on the Moon is called regolith. Regolith will be analysed and give us data that will bring us one step closer to reaching Mars. To hear more about Australia's Moon to Mars program and rover, we spoke to Arvind Ramana from the Australian Space Agency. You're tuned in to Tiba Radio, your voice in the bush, and today on the line we have a very special guest. We are joined by Arvind Ramana, who is the Director of Space Programs at the Australian Space Agency. Thank you for joining us today, Arvind. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Thank you, JR. That was an amazing welcome, and I already feel part of your family now, so that's great. Thank you so much for having me. So, as you mentioned, my name is Arvind Ramana, and I was born and brought up in India, and I migrated to Australia in 2015. It's been 10 years, and my journey, I was a curious kid, tinkering with stuff, playing, breaking things, building them back again. And it led me to be an engineer in my career. So being born and brought up in the 80s and 90s, I had a keen interest for anything that's got to do with space. And ended up by a bit of luck and a lot of hard work as a space systems engineer. So I designed, built, developed satellites for a number of years. And when the Australian Space Agency was created in 2019-2020, I had the opportunity to apply. I was fortunate enough because as I mentioned, I was a migrant and I had just become a citizen, and it just felt like the perfect time because it just fell in place together. And that was my sign to join the agency and join the government. And it's been 5 years now. I am working for the Australian government, running space programs and space missions, and it has been an amazing experience coming from another country, being welcomed into Australia, being part of the culture, working very closely with the Australian industry, academic sector and research sector and students and engineers. This is a dream career and I owe it all. Thank you.
That sounds like an amazing journey. You've already been able to accomplish so much. What can you tell us about NASA's Artemis mission?
Amazing. That's a really good question. So a lot of people ask me, why is Artemis special? What is Artemis? We have been to the moon in the past, in the 1960s, so why is it different? And the answer is, when US went to the moon in the 1960s, it went as a nation, but this Artemis program is about going back to the moon as a humanity. It's an accord. It's an Artemis Accord, like it's called, over 50 countries as partner nations. And this is not a country's return to the moon. It is humanity's return to the moon. And this time, we're going to the moon, not just to be there for a couple of days, but to be there for weeks, for months, to be there sustainably, to live off the land, to perform more science, to perform valuable experiments, and use those lessons learned to create a launch pad or a base from where we could actually go to Mars and explore the cosmos and beyond. So this is humanity's chance to become the cosmic explorers and inspiring a larger scale. And as I mentioned, Artemis Accords partners, over 50 countries are involved in this effort. And this time around, it's going to be much more diverse, much more community-led, and much more collaborative. And we as nation, as Australia, are playing a key part in the Artemis mission.
How is Australia involved in the Artemis mission?
Absolutely. So it's been my pleasure to be involved in Artemis mission as part of the Australian government. So our journey to the moon and working with international partners on these deep space exploration missions, including the moon missions, is not new. Australia played a key role in the lunar landings and the Apollo missions. And Australia has carved out a pretty interesting niche when it comes to lunar missions. Our infrastructure, our position in the southern hemisphere, and our ground stations that are situated here in Australia are critical for humanity to communicate with the moon, Mars, and beyond. So every moon mission that's going to be launching in the next, say, 10, 20 years will have Australia as part of the puzzle because the world needs our ground stations and our expertise to communicate with the moon. That is one part of it. There is also the Australian government's Moon to Mars initiative, through which we are partnering with NASA and other international partners directly. Through these Moon to Mars initiative, the government and the Australian Space Agency have invested in a number of projects that you have heard about before, 70 plus projects from across Australia, from different states and territories, building key technologies that are forming a path to the moon.
So what can you tell us about rover and how will rover get to the moon?
Thank you for asking this question. I'm so excited to talk about it. So we, Australia as a nation, are partnering with NASA to build what we call as the Trailblazer lunar rover. We called it the rover, inspired by kangaroo, and hence the name rover. Kangaroos are iconic in our history and in our stories, and it's our symbolic, unique contribution to historic missions such as Artemis. And the story of the rover began when we were working very closely with NASA to identify what can Australia contribute. And our resourcefulness, our ability to work in rugged terrains, and the philosophy around it was pretty interesting. And hence we thought something like a little lunar rover that is able to provide services to bigger missions. The services that could be, for example, supporting scientific payloads that go to the moon, or transferring little amounts of lunar soil from one place to the other to perform science on that soil. Those are the kind of things that we were thinking about when we designed this rover program. And what it is today is it is a 20-kilogram rover. It's a small robot that is basically a four-wheeled robot that is being designed by a consortium of companies here in Australia. Over 20 partners are involved in this, and this consortium called EPE Lunar Outpost Oceania Consortium, ELO2, they are developing this rover for the Australian Space Agency. This 20-kilogram class rover, entirely built in Australia out of Australian technologies and operated from Australia, is going to carry instruments that support humanity's return to the moon. So these instruments will characterize the structure and the behavior of lunar soil, its elements, what it is made of, and it will provide valuable scientific information for future long-term missions and future long-term settlements on the moon, for instance. So that is the lunar rover. And as I mentioned, over 20 partners in this consortium are involved in the development of this program, and it has been a very inspiring journey for us. In addition to the jobs that are created during this program, in addition to the technologies that Australia is building to this program, it's about the journey as well. Like, imagine one day that when the Australian kids look up, there will be something that Australia built there permanently on the moon. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be there permanently for ages and ages. So that itself is an inspiring story to us. And the name came about with a good, interesting background as well, right? We ran national level competition for this naming of the rover, and there were several front runners. So we chose 5 or 6 of those highly voted names, and then ran a second round of a competition where we invited the public to vote for it. And a lot of support. Rover, the name Rover came by. It is a story of how, Australia as a nation, we take things in a nice, casual, but yet meaningful ways. So that is the story of the rover. And how will it get to the moon? It will be part of a lunar launch, probably most likely launching from US. So this NASA mission will carry this lunar rover to the moon, and we hope that this rover from Australia launches to the moon in around the 2029 time period, which we are excited to look forward to.
Oh, amazing. What do you think the future of space looks like?
Awesome. Future of space is nothing but short of exciting. As I mentioned already, a lot of things are happening here in Australia itself. I get to hear from people of my age who were born in Australia in the 1970s and 80s. They were telling me that never did they imagine that one day they will be able to work in space projects here in Australia, because a lot of them used to go to Europe or US to pursue careers in space, because there was a period of time when Australian industry or the opportunities in Australia were limited. But now, looking back at how much we have achieved, there's a lot of careers here in Australia, Australians able to work on their dream missions and dream projects here in Australia. And future of space as a whole is turning out to be more diverse, more collaborative. Now is the time nations are looking more forward towards collaborations and partnerships. So we are talking about humanity's return to the moon rather than a particular nation's return to the moon. So the future of space has started to become much and more collaborative and more inclusive. And we have heard several episodes in this series already that talk about careers that not just are limited to engineering and STEM, but also to all other types of careers that we may be interested to pursue. Everything has a place in space. And looking forward, I would assume that based on the information that we have, there is no way but going up. As people always say, space is not the limit. So everything looks bright currently, and it's up to us to ride this momentum and create opportunities for Australia moving forward.
Alrighty, Arvind, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with myself and everybody out there on the TIBA network, covering more than 30 Aboriginal communities here in the top end, and of course Darwin, Palmerston and surrounding areas. Really enjoyed having a chat with you today, and I'll let you get back to it. I know you're a very busy man, but yes, really enjoyed speaking with you today about the future of space.
Chris, JR, it was my pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. And to all the listeners out there, thank you.
As you've heard today, there are many exciting things about the future of space in Australia. There are over 600 Australian organisations that are involved in space and are working on amazing projects that will continue to advance our space sector. And soon, Australia will have its very own rover, or rover, on the moon as we help with NASA's plan to return to the moon and put people on Mars. As we come to the end of today's segment, we also conclude our series with the Australian Space Agency. We hope that you've enjoyed the series and have learnt about what the space sector is and why space matters. We also hope that you're inspired about the opportunities in space and the benefit the First Nations people can bring to a uniquely Australian approach to space. If you want to learn more, you can visit the Australian Space Agency's website at space.gov.au, where you will find a bunch of resources and information. You can also find all 10 episodes of this series on TIBA's YouTube channel. Thank you again for tuning in.